Good morning, Madam President. Would I be in order for a point of personal privilege?
You're in order, Senator Hogg.
All right. Well, thank you, Madam President. I appreciate that. I think it's time to kind of review where we are on the investigations here 40 days after the story broke in the Des Moines Register about the hush money scandal. We've been in the Senate. The House kind of rushed in and without doing any investigation passed a bill. The governor did a 2-hour internal investigation which involved several people talking to Director Carroll about what happened, and that's been the extent of the internal investigation by Governor Branstad. Senate's taken a little different approach. Legislative obligation of this chamber to investigate and find out a few more facts about what's going on. And we've learned, without our efforts, wouldn't have happened, but we learned that despite the denials by Director Carroll and Governor Branstad, there was hush money, pay for silence, that was offered and paid to workers terminated as part of the Department of Administrative Services reorganization. Remember that we had to pry that out. Governor Branstad thought that was so serious that he terminated Director Carroll. So this wasn't kind of an idle search for information. This had real consequences. There's still a number of things we have not learned, however. We have not learned who told Ryan Lamb to offer the hush money. We have not learned where the money actually came from. If you recall that meeting, there was uncertainty about where the money came from to actually make the payment. Might have been federal funds, might not have been, didn't know. We also haven't learned about that problem in all of the other agencies that had the confidentiality agreements. I mean, we've been working at this, trying to pry information out. My recollection is there were 8, 9, 10, 11 other agencies that did it. So we're going to have to investigate that. At the Department of Administrative Services, we learned that they were able to fire merit employees and hire replacement workers without posting any job notice, without any real search, without advertising. The result of which was that Doug Woodley could hire friends of Woodley without following equal employment opportunity best practices. That's something we found out because of our investigation. We also found out that the replacement workers who had not previously worked for state government, these 3 newly hired people, were then given the authority to hire construction managers for millions of dollars of state taxpayer money. And we still need a lot of answers on both ends of that hiring equation. We need answers on how and why the replacement workers were selected. You'll recall that Doug Woodley said, I can't remember who in the industry he talked to. So we need to know that. And we also need to know how and why the replacement workers, who we have not heard from, by the way, Carr, Miller, I'm blanking on the other name, Hagen. We need to hear from them. But how and why were they able to select the construction management contracts at a cost of over $11 million in taxpayer money? That's real money, by the way. That's real money. So we still need answers to that. We also need answers on whether Lon Anderson's April 16, 2014 estimate of savings was real, or whether it was just funny money to spin the public and try to justify a good old boys network of hiring. We've learned that, we've learned at least the allegation. It's an allegation still at this point by a former state senator, Jim Reardon, that pressure was applied to, without going through a process, to hire a specific person for administrative law judge. We learned in this morning's paper that the Secretary of State, after firing 4 workers, immediately, he decided to retain his deputy for 7 months, even though we're unclear whether the deputy was doing anything. Kind of interesting. We've learned that despite the denials by Director Carroll and Lon Anderson that there was a blacklist, or maybe more precisely a do not hire list, or maybe more precisely a do not hire database. They denied it was there, then we learned it was there. We learned from Director Minahan, or Human Resource Director Minahan, that there are people on that list who are there with no documented reason. We also learned there are people on the list like the whistleblower at the ILEA who was threatened, that she's on the list. Of course, while the perpetrator of the workplace harassment and workplace threats is still working there. Should be on the list, but isn't. We've learned that the DAS has no process for notifying people they're on the list, nor any timely procedure for fixing that. If somebody's on the list, finds out about it, applies for a job, oh, I'm on the list, want to appeal, there's no timely process for fixing that. We learned that there are no cases of child abuse or dependent adult abuse by any workers in state government that have gone unreported to the Department of Human Services or that have been concealed by a confidentiality agreement, at least to the best of the knowledge of our Human Resources Director, Michelle Minahan. We still have not been told by Governor Branstad or his office what constitutes a lot of child abuse, sexual abuse, or elder abuse. Need some answers on that. We've also learned that the process for investigating complaints of harassment and workplace violence has not necessarily been ideal, or maybe I should say more precisely, maybe the investigations have been okay, but the process for following up on them has not been very well done by the Branstad administration. We learned a little bit about this strange case where in response to workplace violence or alleged workplace threats that Doug Woodley brought in Charlie Smithson from the Secretary of State's office. Very odd situation. We probably need to learn more about that. I think we do need to learn more about that. We've learned that the governor's office blames the Department of Administrative Services for how Mike Quinn at the Iowa Law Enforcement Academy was handled. We've also been told that Quinn knew about confidential complaints. A lot more there that we need to know. At the Veterans Home, we did learn that the DAS performed an investigation. Sounded like a significant investigation in February 2012 about harassment and workplace threats. We've learned that those investigatory reports were given to the governor's chief of staff around February of 2012, maybe a little later. We obviously need more answers there. What was done about it, if anything? And if not, why not? And oh, by the way, clearly they were capable of getting rid of people at the Veterans Home because over 20 employees were put on the blacklist after that investigation and before Worley left. So what did the governor's office do? What did the governor do? What did the governor's office tell Worley? Were those confidential complaints preserved, the confidentiality? Now, here's what the legislature can't do. We don't have the ability to change the way that Governor Branstad manages state government. If he wants to not manage or not micromanage, we can't do anything about that. That's a choice he's making, and he has to be accountable for that. But we can do two things. First of all, we can address the real problems in state government that have been identified. We can address that, and I know Oversight brought a bill out yesterday that does that. And the second thing we can do is we can continue our duty as legislators to understand the facts, to provide the oversight that the people of Iowa are counting on us to provide. Madam President, I want to thank you and encourage all of us to continue to do our duty, improve policy, and investigate what needs to be investigated. Thank you, Madam President.